Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ravinia Festival. Please locate the exit nearest your seat. The closest exit may be behind you. Please note that the taking of photographs, including the use of camera phones and the use of audio or video equipment, is strictly prohibited. As a courtesy to the artist and your fellow patrons, please ensure that all mobile phones, pagers, and any item that rings, buzzes, or flashes and has an on-off switch have been silenced. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you for making it a great day at Ravinia.
Good afternoon. My name is Rufus Reid. I'm one of the faculty coaches for the participants here with the Steans Institute. And you'll have to come back Friday to hear all of them. There's 17 people who have been chosen. You can audition to come here. You have to be chosen to come here. And we're very fortunate this year to have one of our alumni from this about 8 years ago. This young lady was one of the participants here. And in that, what is it, 17 now? What is that? A few years, but she has really made a name for herself and is on a daily basis. And tonight she's going to be performing with Pat Metheny's group. And it really gives me great pleasure, first of all, because she's a bassist. I'm a bassist. And she's really doing us all proud, not only being part of this institution that she's come through, but she's truly making an international, global recognition of her name and her musicianship and her whole being. So please welcome Linda O.
To be here back at Ravinia. It's been a little while for me. I owe a lot to places like Ravinia and a lot of these educational programs. They were kind of integral in my development as a musician and also allowed me to meet fantastic like-minded musicians, as I'm sure some of you students have already met some people that you want to play with and get to know more, you know. Yeah, and I've a lot to owe to Mr. Rufus Reid here. One of my first lessons that I took in New York City was at Rufus' place in Teaneck. So I hope that also these students, once you take all the information that you're given, that you can do the same when you rise up, you know. My name is Linda Mahan O, and I was born in Malaysia. and I grew up in Western Australia, in Perth. And I've been living in New York City for the past 11 or so years now. And I like to play bass. I like to write music. I like to play music. Yeah, I spent the last 12 years in New York City doing my master's at the Manhattan School of Music, but also just trying to play as much as I possibly could, you know, trying to play with as many different people, trying to hone in on various skills and, you know, just become a better musician, just to learn more and more. And yeah, I've had the fantastic opportunity of playing with some amazing musicians and forming my own bands as well. And I'm here today playing with Mr. Pat Metheny on guitar tonight. That's just a little bit about me. I don't want to talk too much because I know these guys are itching to play. But before we start, any immediate questions or anything you're dying to comments, recommendations? No? Okay, cool. Before we start, can I just get everyone's names? Adam? Shai? Aaron? Corey? Elliot. Okay, beautiful. Cool. What would you like to play today?
We're going to start off with a tune by Corey.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. Go ahead. Beautiful. I don't really know what to say. I think you all sound great. Should I not be standing here? Okay. Yeah, everyone's got super strong time and really, you know, there's not a lot I can say with how you guys all play individually on your instruments, I think. I mean, just a couple of comments here and there. Obviously, a room like this is very live, and you've probably had to, I'm not sure, this is the end of your week right now? In the middle? So you've kind of had a chance to play in here and get to know. So, I mean, obviously, you know, playing to the room as much as possible. You know, I was kind of just sitting there, so it might be different for other people sitting in the room, but just, you know, some dynamic awareness, you know, as you've probably heard that a million times, but, you know, it's so true, and it's, you know, it's hard when you know, you don't have anyone out front necessarily helping to control things, and if it feels okay for you on stage, it's very easy to kind of imagine that that's what it's like, you know, out there, you know. But, you know, just a couple of ideas, just food for thought. Aaron, just my personal preference is having the amp just a little higher, just so I can hear it a bit more, and it doesn't kind of go through my feet, through my legs. But that's just my opinion, you know.
Elevated higher.
Yeah, I usually do, but you know, everyone's different, and you know, I see a lot of guitarists too with their amps, you know, right here. So, you know, everyone's different, but that's just my personal preference. You know, in playing in a live room, you have a lot of options to try and explore that setting as well, you know, not just dynamically, but in terms of note length as well, especially from the drums, I think, in my opinion, you know. A lot can be said with just maybe shorter and long, you know, some kind of exploring different lengths, you know, from the bass as well, you know. When it's this live to me, sometimes you might want to think about just some other options. How is the piano for you? It sounds kind of dark to me. Is that the action's responsive, or it is? Yeah. Okay, cool. You know, just sometimes I kind of want to hear there's a lot going on, and I want to hear some sort of clarity sometimes, and you know, also I have the Realist Lifeline pickup on there, and that can be quite dark sometimes. So, you know, sometimes you might want to think about EQ and that sort of thing. Funny, when you went to the walking, like, I could really hear that clearly, and, you know, I don't know if that's just, you know, part of that kind of power thing, you know, but just trying to think about those things, even when you are playing like the kind of thing, you know, how are you going to make that kind of cut, you know, and it might be like a volume thing with the amp or the EQ, or it might be playing closer to the bridge at that point, you know. I don't know, just kind of experimenting with those things that can kind of help cut through, you know. And with a tune that's this energetic, and you have such a live room, you know, I think you can afford to have a bit more with peaks and valleys and that sort of thing, like even in the heads, you know, as well as in the solo sections. And, you know, carrying on from that note length idea, Adam, right? Just me personally, like, just knowing, like, I feel like the pedal for me can be a really beautiful thing, but if it's the right pedal, that is, you know, the sustain pedal, for me, it's there's a place to use it, and then sometimes they may not be the right place to use it, you know. And you know, I used to play piano. I don't really play piano anymore, really. But there's that kind of, I know I had that kind of inclination to want to have the pedal on all the time just to connect certain things, you know. Whereas a lot of that can already be done with your hands, so that you don't have to necessarily have it sound all sustained, you know. So I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes reliance on the sustain pedal can lead to maybe not exactly what you want, you know. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that you think about, but Billy Charles, like, do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, I agree that the I tend to not want to, I like to dig in as a piano player, you know, especially with active drums, you know.
Yeah.
I don't use the pedal in those instances, but when it breaks down, you know, sometimes very judicious use. I notice a lot of piano players nowadays use the soft pedal a lot. Sometimes I use the soft pedal when I don't want to be hurt. Maybe if I'm like, I don't know the head really clearly, you know,
Yeah.
I'll just use the soft pedal, just like I'm kind of playing, and you know, hopefully you won't notice. But it can be beautiful too. I think there is a tendency, there can be a danger of overusing the pedal. If for nothing else, it can like make things less clear. You know, the harmonies that you're playing, the lines that you're playing. And I find in a jazz situation, you have to change your touch a lot. You know, and it, having played with like Freddie, you know, and he likes loud drummers, and you know, I had to really work on distinguishing the notes, you know, not be a piano player actually, but be more like a person, like a sax player. So yeah, the pedal I think has to be judicious use of it, you know, you're on point there.
Yeah, yeah, that's good information for me. Yeah, to know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, something that maybe you can think about and work on. I mean, there's always that question for everyone on every instrument of just what can you do on your own without manipulating your instrument, you know? How far can you go without necessarily changing the gear, you know? You get people asking, oh, what gear to use, what strings, what this and that, but I mean, so much of it is in the fingers and in the hands and in the you know, embouchure, that sort of thing, so maybe, yeah, just have a think about that. I mean, everyone can have a think about that, really, you know, when we're talking about bright and dark, you know, closer to the bridge, whatever, you know, things you can do. The other thing was, just in terms of time, not that I thought this was a big problem at all or anything, but just whether or not to, like, just being aware of, like, where you are with, like, foot tapping and that sort of thing. Like, it's a good thing, and it might actually enhance your solidity with certain rhythms to either to not foot tap, you know, or just to be aware of it is a good thing, I think. All kind of awareness of the body when you're playing is a great thing. I mean, not just for time and feel, but also just for tension and longevity when you're playing for years and years and years, you know. So just maybe think about those things. How did you guys feel? Any comments or?
I had fun.
What did you like about it?
The energy was good. I mean, it kind of came out strong.
Mm.
It was fun to play on.
Yeah.
We were listening to each other. It was good to, like, I heard a lot of ideas being thrown around and being grabbed by everybody else.
Mm.
That was pretty fun.
Great. Great. I mean, it sounds tired, and it sounds like you guys have been working on this. I mean, you all sound like super strong players, and, you know, I think it's great. I guess the next step then is just kind of internalizing, you know, whatever you can. I mean, obviously, you're here, you're probably learning a ton of different tunes and writing your own tunes, so, you know, and I was seeing some eye contact and that sort of thing, which is good, you know, but sometimes it's very easy to get kind of bogged down in the page, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind actually hearing the head again, if that's cool. Yeah, sure. Yeah? And maybe this time with the intro, just maybe a bit more percussive and a bit more laying in there, you know. peaks and valleys, and just like the composition is great, you know, and you've got these little things happening that I think could afford to be brought out. That little piano line that comes out, yeah. And the horns right there are measured 10. Are you holding your note right there? Or
Just for the measure.
yeah. Is there a way that there can be an earlier decay so that that line can come out more?
Not sure.
Can we try that one? Can we try it from measure?
9.
Yeah. Well, actually, can we try the top again? Ba down, go down, go down. You know? 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. I feel like that made like the slightest minute difference, but yeah, maybe if we can kind of harness that kind of idea a little bit more, you know, that kind of decaying for these other lines to come through, and also just, you know, maybe overall, like, where do you want that peak to go in that melody, you know? Could be something that you want to think about, Corey, in terms of, you know, what dynamics to actually put in there. You know, maybe the first bit, and then that's your kind of arrival point or something, just for more contrast, you know. And especially in a room like this, you kind of want contrast, you know. One thing I was also going to say, Aaron, was just, you've probably been told this, I'm guessing, but just, you know, watching the thumb over the, yeah, which, you know, I do that from time to time, depending on what it is, and if it is something that I need that to happen, you know, but, you know, that bass line, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm just thinking in terms of long term, you know, like, that's going to put strain on this, you know, in my opinion. I mean, a lot of great players do kind of do that from time to time, but it might just be something you want to think about, you know. To me, when, especially at that point, they do that E flat, you know, yeah, which is interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a cool fingering to do. I would probably instinctively maybe do the E flat on the D string, but probably that's too much jumping anyway, right? But either way, sometimes I do think the thumb thing can be a bit hindering, you know, just something to think about, you know, with the left hand technique. Yeah, but great. And, you know, one thing I just, with, like, that opening, it's tricky because you have to set that up strong, you know, for everyone. And I think, you know, we all work on time. Everyone works on the eighth notes, whatever, and I hope you do. But, you know, the space is just as important as the notes that you play. I mean, you've probably already been told that, but that might even be something you want to incorporate in your practice if you're practicing with a metronome, is you're playing that line, but really feeling that space, you know. Get in, get in, get in, get in. get in, that space is just as important, you know, so that you can all really come in strong. Maybe just one more time, the head. Is that cool? Awesome. Cool. Great. Woo. Do you want to play your second piece? you guys feel? Good? Great? Yeah, great. That's what it's all about. Yeah, cool. Nice. I mean, yeah, I mean, great. Everyone's sounding great. Everyone, you know, playing over the changes, that sort of thing. What do you think could have been better, or what could you? Let me rephrase that. How else could you have approached this, or if you were to do it again? And I'm asking you guys just for self-awareness, and you know, just to kind of, you know, make yourselves kind of think, what could you have done, or what could have been different, or.
Particularly for myself in my head, I was okay.
Why was it okay?
I don't know. I was just trying not to play innocent the whole way through.
Right.
And I didn't like all of the things that I did.
Oh, okay, like the little question and answer things. I thought it was great. You know, I think sometimes it's a lot of it is about conviction too. You know, that moment of hesitation. You know, it only takes a second, but it can affect how much conviction you have with that kind of, you know, little things like that. You know, I think overall, you know, you all play at such a high level already that there are things that are just kind of like fine-tuning things that you might want to think about. You know, things such as like hookup and time and you know, how many of you actually play with each other? Or are you all kind of like, you guys just met today, like this week, and yeah, cool. For me, I don't know if anyone else felt this way with this, but it was a really nice, relaxed tempo. But for me, sometimes with the relaxed tempos, I still want like that little bit of or something, you know, that kind of makes it move, you know. And I could tell after the bass solo that, Corey, maybe you wanted it to tip a bit more and you were kind of pushing it a little bit more, you know. And you know, that tends to happen in bass solos when everyone drops out and, you know, I mean, not that you guys dropped out, but you know, it has a tendency for that to maybe happen, you know, and then you might want to kind of pick it up a little bit, you know. But whatever happens, you know, I mean, everyone's time is elastic and it's all just about compromise, you know. But for me, I just wanted that snap that was just a little bit ahead. And, you know, I think, me personally, Aaron, like, it might mean kind of, even when it's too feel, and even when you are playing quiet, with just a bit of it, that attack or that snap or something, might even help that. Even when it's a two feel and it's just kind of sitting and simmering, you know, there's just something about it that just helps it cook or something. I don't know if anyone else felt that way at all.
Yeah, I kind of did. I would like to have heard, it swung and the changes were dealt with and it sounded great, but I would have, it seemed like there was a glass ceiling and how intense it could get. And yeah, like you said, there's like a dance-like quality that I would have, you know, I was wanting. Maybe, I mean, not to keep riding you, Aaron, you know, but maybe, I don't know, and I'm not a bass player, you could speak more to this, Linda, than I could, but maybe there was, I felt like the notes were kind of sustained into each other. They were kind of dun, 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 and maybe there might have been a little more point to each note or something, even in the two feel. Dun, 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 dun. So that the triplety things that, you know, you associate with a jazz feel, you know, are kind of implied, you know. Dun, dun. You're hearing dun, 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 dun. If it's like dun, bum, you kind of hear it more like like quarter notes or half notes or something. And maybe I felt like maybe the drums could have been like, there could have been more triplety left-hand things that could have, and from Adam on your end, you know, maybe more percussive on the piano and just simply louder, you know, dun, 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 so that is really locked in. It's an agreement with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point with the sustain and the note length, because I think that has a lot to do with it. You know, when it has at that point and that decay, it's a different feeling than when a note is just like this. And in a room this live, sustained, everything's going to be a bit more sustained. You know, not that you need to play everything shorter, but it's just a little bit goes a long way in terms of like altering that touch to make it have that point and that bounce. You know. Yeah. Yeah. And that goes for everyone in terms of like where you place that, you know, that kind of thing, you know. If it has that attack, then it also, for me, it sounds like there's more conviction too when there is like attack. And that doesn't necessarily mean loud even, like it's just having that decisive thing that puts a note somewhere as opposed to just kind of vaguely in this region, you know. So that might be something you want to think about, you know. Yeah. One thing I was going to mention too with, you know, like everyone's cutting the changes and playing beautifully, you know, just little things to think about that might just help lift things up another notch. You know, we all get into little patterns of what we're comfortable with and little isms that we have on our instrument, that sort of thing, that help us get through things. And, you know, you're all probably doing this, but there are things that you can do to help kind of break out of the box that you're putting yourself in, maybe. Just a comment, Shai, your solo was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I just noticed that there were quite a few times where you landed right back on the root, like, and I wondered, like, not that it sounded bad or anything, but the question is like whether or not it's intentional or whether or not it's something that you're relying on, you know. And I think everyone could benefit from recording more and just listening back more, so that you could kind of assess, oh yeah, that's the thing I do. Like I do that. I record almost everything that I play on. You know, I have a billion voice memos, you know, and I listen back and I'm like, that's something that I do every time. And you know, what little things can you do to kind of break out of that? And you know, there are lots of things that you can do, especially with standards that you probably know really well, like this one. Is, you know, really experimenting with changing keys, that sort of thing, to kind of just kind of get you outside a different mindset. And you know, you are going to play differently if you turn this into a different key, because there'll be other things that lay easier in your instrument, and then you start hearing other lines, and then when you bring it back to this home key, then you might come up with something different, you know. So, you know, just those questions that you want to ask yourself is what is it that you're trying to say on your instrument, and are you falling back on things that you're relying on? And how can you push yourself that extra, you know, length to just explore what else you can do, you know? And also then, you know, when you get locked into playing these same phrases that lay easily in the instrument because you know they work, you know, they might work on A major, and then you play this thing, and it outlines a chord. This repetition is actually also, and something I'm big on is like, I like to read a lot about like cognition and what happens to your brain when you do this and that. And this repetition, these kind of muscle memory things, like your brain actually stops registering up to a point when you repeat things over and over again, which is why they say when you practice, you shouldn't just practice mindless warm-ups all the time, stuff that you already know, because your brain's actually, it's already filed that away and you're not really doing anything with that. So push yourself and try to get out of those habitual playing tendencies so that you can search for something more. Any questions or comments? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing I have to mention is that, like, sometimes, well, I have to say a lot of the times, you know, playing songs like this, you know, I think it's been played so many times, you know, that you wanna deliver, you know, and it's already been done in the sense that the iconic recording has already been made, you know, that everyone references. And, you know, it's kind of like sometimes when I play well-known jazz songs or standards, you know, like I think it's a lot of pressure almost, you know. Whereas when you play an original tune, it's like, it's original. You can make it however way you want, you know, but you should still have that same conviction when you're playing someone else's tune, you know, that has been done. And there's still a way you can make music and have your own spin on things while still having that kind of quality of the composition too. I mean, that's always the push and pull, right? Like of how much you honor this composition and who wrote it and the original recording, you know, as opposed to what it is that you're hearing and feeling, that sort of thing. And I don't know if you guys feel that way too, but it is sometimes almost harder, even though you know the song way better than you know the original that Corey wrote, you know. I mean, the other thing also is sometimes it can be almost easier to rely on sheet music too. I mean, that's another aspect of things, you know. I don't know if this is pertains to what you just said, but like
But yeah, I mean, you have to individualize it. It's your song, even if it's not your song. It's your song.
yeah.
You know, push the limit. Even if you played it a million times.
Yeah. Any questions?
I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about coming from a place like Australia, where I imagine is probably a little bit less music like this, to New York, and then also briefly, if you can, you know, mention some things that you picked up from leading bands, you know,
Yeah.
as a bass player specifically.
Sure. So I'm from Perth, the West Coast. There were a lot of musicians from Sydney and Melbourne, and that's on the East Coast. So specifically where I'm from, there were a lot of really talented musicians. You know, the history, I don't know a lot about the history of jazz, particularly in Perth, but I do know that there were a lot of kind of traditional jazz musicians who were influenced by some of the British jazz musicians. And you get this, there's an interesting scene in Perth because there's actually like a really strong traditional jazz scene, you know, where they play like early New Orleans, you know, Hot 7, that sort of stuff, you know, like Hot 5, Hot 7, like in Fremantle, which is south of Perth, about 20 minutes. But then we have a conservatory that, you know, has a jazz degree, but also some really strong fusion players as well. Dane Alderson, who now plays in the Yellow Jackets, he's from Perth, my hometown, and Troy Roberts, who plays sax with Jeff Tame Watts, he's from my hometown as well. So there were a lot of great musicians, you know. We still had a lot of jam sessions, and you know, we had access to recordings, and even more so now, like with YouTube and all the rest of it. The one thing that we lacked was a lot of musicians coming through, you know, like when someone came through, it was such a big deal because we're so far away from everything. But you know, we all had recordings and we referenced that. You know, I mean, a lot of my learning came from there and also moving to New York as well, you know. Kind of every scene has their own tunes that they play, you know, amongst the scene of musicians and the way they play them. So I learned a lot from there and being in New York as well, you know. Sorry, the second part to your question was being a band leader, right?
Yeah, like anything that you picked up specifically from like the bass player's role, because you know, it's a little bit less common.
Yeah, well, you know, it's all kind of, it varies, like whether or not I'm playing in my own band or someone else's band, and every band leader I play with is very different, you know. I'll be in situations where it's kind of like you only play this and you have to play this, you know. And then other situations where it's like, I don't know, play whatever it is you want, you know, and figure it out, you know. So, you know, a lot of it to me is just a balance. I know that sounds really vague, but it's just like, I still try and stay as true to myself as possible. If I know I'm kind of like fudging things, then it's like, how do I fix that? You know, how do I make it so that what I'm playing is actually really intentional and with some sort of clarity and intention, you know? There's a band that I play in called Soundprints with Joe Lovano and Dave Douglas, and you know, the music there is kind of very open to interpretation, and it can really vary from night to night, you know. And there are other bands that it's kind of a bit more adjusted for the composition, you know. A lot of Pat's tunes that we're going to play tonight are, you know, iconic Pat Metheny tunes that have iconic bass lines, that sort of thing that, you know, if I were to completely stray from that, it may not necessarily be that composition anymore, you know. And in my group, I'm a lot more diplomatic with the roles. I rarely tell people, like, this has to be played or this has to happen. Those things are kind of more tools in order to indicate sections, necessarily, not necessarily dictating what should happen musically, you know, depending on the composition, but who knows. Maybe I might get more dictatorial eventually, but you know, for me, ultimately, it's about being strong, being clear, being true to yourself, that you're not kind of fudging things and just kind of glossing over what you're given, and being as musical as possible with the people that you're with and being open to that, you know. It's all that mishmash of things, you know. Yeah. Yes?
So when did you start writing in regards to when you started playing bass? And then how would you say your writing has influenced your playing?
Right. Well, I grew up at a young age. I played piano, and we went to a piano school, a Yamaha piano school, and they encouraged us to write music when we were like 8 or, you know, around that age. But that was more in a way to kind of introduce the concept of theme and development or form. You know, it wasn't really to express yourself, you know. It's kind of like, we have an A and this is a B, and let's do AAB, you know, that kind of thing. I feel like for the first part of, when I kind of really got into looking at jazz music and improvising was towards the end of high school and into college. And I wrote very little, actually, because I just wanted to know how to play this instrument, you know, and so much of it was just like trying to transcribe and learning recordings, that sort of thing. And it wasn't kind of till the end of that college degree or the middle where I actually really started to write more seriously, you know. And then, you know, and then throughout masters at Manhattan School, like they encourage you to write all the time, and it was like more like a tune a week, and which is great, you know. And then upon leaving there, like I have several groups that I write for. I have the quartet that I'm currently touring, which we're playing in Chicago next week on the 17th, Constellation, if anyone's here. Shameless plug. So with those tunes, a lot of those are kind of more relatively lead sheet oriented, but with other little twists and turns. They're kind of, to me, they're like a little bit of like puzzles, each one. But then I have another group which has string quartet and piano, bass, drums, sax, which Greg Ward, who's from Chicago, plays in. And with that, like I've written a bunch of music that I've been working on for the last 10 years. Some of which I'm really trying to really revamp, and a lot of that is through looking at a lot of different scores and just trying to also give myself different parameters with composition to see what I can do with that, and just trying to talk to as many people, try and get lessons, and yeah, there's a lot you can learn from just study scores, and
When you say scores, you're referring to like classical scores?
yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes.
It's kind of a two-part question.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could, cause I've seen like your videos on YouTube and I've checked your albums out, and I was just wondering like, what's your approach to playing the bass? And that's the first part, and composition too, if you wanted to talk about that. Then the second part is, if they're like, who are people who you've checked out or recordings you've listened to help you like open up to be the player you are today?
In terms of like how I approach playing the bass, I feel like kind of like what I mentioned before. It's like a balance of being true to myself and playing the role of the bass and being clear, but also being open to dialogue and who you're playing with, what setting you're in, what context you're in, whether or not be my band or someone else's band, and that balance between improvising and playing a composition. In terms of writing, that's something that has taken me longer, in the sense that, I still feel like I'm a student in all regards, on the bass and as a composer, but that one, it's, I try and give myself, like I mentioned, those parameters. There's one string quartet thing that I've arranged that's au prévave, and the parameters that I gave myself were that each string instrument has to play the melody of au prévave assigned to a different key, but they can play it in any rhythm, any duration. And if anyone wants to see that, I have the score. And that is the rule, and how do I make music from that? And I altered all the durations to make it all kind of fit in a way that I thought was somewhat musical, And, I give myself those parameters, but I don't believe that writing should be all like, oh yeah, we fit this code, and then I also want to step away from what I've written and actually feel like that's me, that's my voice, as opposed to just a bunch of notes that fit a bunch of different parameters, So ultimately, I feel like sincerity is kind of the biggest thing, and I do feel like in the past I've written these things that are more of a tip of the hat to something that I've studied, but isn't necessarily my voice. And I think that's the thing that I've actually had to really get over a lot, because so much is expected of you. I think sometimes as a musician, like, how do you want to represent yourself? And it's very easy for people to pigeonhole you into one thing, So I feel like that's a lifelong endeavor of just kind of exploring and trying to keep as true to myself as possible, if that makes any sense, what I just said. Yeah.
I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about the what and the how about your career trajectory from where we are now to where you are now.
Okay. What and the how? Like I said, I just kind of took every opportunity, that I could to play, and a lot of that was because I was just curious about different types of music and different players. Like, I wanted to know what it would feel like to play with that person. It's like, oh, okay, well, let's do a session, let's do that, or I wanted to be put in as many different situations as possible so that I could feel that I was strong enough to deliver. And there would be times where I'd just be like, oh, this is so hard, this is freaking hard, and it never feels like you're getting anywhere, but everything is like, ups and downs, and you just kind of get over it. It was just about playing as much as possible, There are other people who I'm friends with and close peers of mine who kind of didn't go through that same thing, I had this conversation with pianist Matt Mitchell, who I play with in Dave Douglas's quintet, and he kind of went through the opposite way of just like, he just listened to a bunch of music. He went to school studying piano, but he actually worked at a library for a while, and and then kind of came back playing, you know, and he has his different thing, and you know, everyone's different. I mean, for me as a bass player, I felt that I needed to learn certain things, you know, certain lessons to do with like stability, solidity, and you know, note attack and decay, that sort of thing. You know, like certain things that just can't be learned unless you do it, unless you play, you know, unless you make yourself available and get out there to whatever jam session or whatever, you know. And, you know, it was like doing programs like this too that really helped, you know. You're probably feeling that, like you're meeting a lot of people and maybe forming bands and stuff as a result of this or whatever, or, you know, ultimately, you know, it's a community and you want to be a member of this community, and there are so many musicians that you can meet and like-minded people, you know. So, you know, I did Ravinia, I did Banff, I did Betty Carter, I did so many, all the jazz workshops, you know, and I learned so much from them, and just slowly, you know, word gets around, you play with more people, and then, you know, you start playing people's bands, and then that's pretty much it, you know. Is there anything specifically that you want to ask, or?
The one that popped in my head first is about the gig you're doing tonight with Pat.
Yep.
How did you get that? How did that work?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I met Pat in 2013 in Detroit. We were opening for Pat, the Soundprints band, Joe Lovano and Dave Douglas, and it was, we were opening for the Unity band, Pat's Unity band, and yeah, I just ran into Pat backstage, and we talked for a second, and he was very nice. And then 2 years later, same thing, I ran into him backstage watching my friend Matt Mitchell play, actually. And then he asked to play, and from that, it just led to this. So make sure you go hang backstage at jazz festivals. Yeah, moral of the story. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's, you know, and like I said, you know, I've been in New York for about 11 years now, and it's like, yeah, who knows, you just keep playing, you just keep trying to make music and try to learn and not get dark. I mean, I don't know if that pertains to I mean, it's very easy, I think, in an artistic career to sometimes get dark at moments where you feel like it's really hard, you know, it's really hard to make the music you want to make. And to get it out there and to be noticed, you know, but you just have to do it, you know, if your heart really wants it, you know. Yeah. Hi, how are you? I remember you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, since you've been in this program and since you've been through the college thing, I don't know, as a student, just coming, I mean, we'll always be students forever, because that's just what music is.
Yeah.
How do you deal, and how did you deal with a bunch of information being thrown at you and feeling like you never can ever be on top of it?
Yeah. Well, I recommend that, like, you're right, it's very, very difficult to be on top of it all the time, but I still look back at notes that I've written of lessons or, you know, classes, that sort of thing, and scores that I kind of looked at but didn't really, you know, like I'm always going back. So even if you can't get through it all now, like just keep it there, be organized and have a system of organized, you know, I have like 2 file cabinets, one of them that's full of music, other people's music that I keep in folders, you know, and then I still have notes from Manhattan School, that sort of thing. Or there's a great app called Scanner Pro, which is really good. You just scan it and you can just have it in your phone or something to reference, you know. I mean, I have a ton of things that on my list that I've always wanted to check out, you know, and sometimes I only get this far in, but at least you have it there, you know, and I have faith that I will get through it one day, if it be in 5-10 years or something, you know. But yeah, just, yeah, keep calm and organized, and you'll be okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. How are we doing on time? I just want to...
We're doing just fine.
Okay.
We can wrap it up or continue it.
Okay. Cool.
In terms of the business side,
Mhm.
have you noticed anything that you might want to, any tips or any like pitfalls that you've seen that you might want to warn us about?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but what I'd have to say is just don't get dark, because it can be very easy to do that, and it's like, and I feel like if you want longevity in your musical life, like really cherish those moments that you have with your peers and playing music, and even in the practice room. Like there are people out there who don't have that luxury of having a practice room or time or a space to play music, and I think having that gratitude is really what can like push you through whatever dark stuff you might encounter in the business aspect of things. It's like, how much money did you get from YouTube plays this week? Oh, 0.0001 cents. It's like, that's dark, but, there are other ways we can kind of figure it out, and if we can keep playing, keep this music alive and pass it on too, like really have that community, like I think that would be really great, have this supportive element, and keep working, keep talking about music, keep playing, keep writing, like, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, if there's any specifics, just, let me email me or something. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Could you play one for us, please?
Yeah, yep, sure. Sorry, just one more. Yeah. Yeah, like what I said about parameters, one of the things that I never got to look at, we mentioned about having so much information that it's really hard to check out everything. And one of the books that I never really checked out was Slanimsky's Book of Scales, and and I was just checking through that the other day, and just that concept of like splitting up like 2 octaves in equal parts, or an octave in equal parts, like that gave me some ideas, that sort of thing, and just just trying to find inspiration in anything, and I get a lot of my inspiration from just practicing and finding little things that I latch onto, and trying to go from there, Yeah, cool. Cool. Thanks, guys. Okay, I'll play something, I guess. You guys can sit down if you want, or relax. Aaron, do you mind if I play your bass for a second? Yeah, sure. Sorry, one of the things to deal with is, as a touring bass player, is just figuring out instruments and being selective. Yeah. Is this this is a rental?
Yeah, it's true.
Any requests? Hopefully not like in a urge or something. You about to say that? Anything? talking about clarity and true to yourself, I kind of fudged the bridge a little bit, but you know. Yeah, so thank you all for being here. Yeah, any other questions now? You all great?